Hey folks, so this week we're going to be looking at creating a Rube Goldberg machine using Unity 2D. The whole goal of this week is to really get us familiar with 2D workflows in Unity, but in particular it's all about using the 2D physics engine inside Unity. We're going to do a little bit of work on UI as well to get interactions going, and we're going to have a start in screen and we're going to have a way to restart our game. So we basically want to have a total flow that someone can come into our game on itch.io. They're going to hit a start button. It's going to set a ball rolling through our Rube Goldberg machine, and then it's going to reach a point at the end that's then going to say, well done, you finished the game, and give them a chance to restart it. So to start off, the first thing we're going to do is inside in Unity Hub, we're going to select 2D Core. We're going to name our project Rube Goldberg, save it wherever we want, and hit the Create Project button. Go. Now, it's going to take Unity a couple of minutes just to get the project set up and get everything ready. So while that's happening, what I'm going to do is jump to Google Chrome and just talk about a couple of things that are, like, in case you're not familiar with the Rube Goldberg machine. I'll have additional details on this in the down below as well, but basically Rube Goldberg was this cartoonist in America in the early 1900s, and he developed these sort of designs for these kind of self-operating type machines. So the idea was basically that a ball would maybe drop down through a chute, slide along something, start a lighter, and the lighter would do something else basically. So we can maybe follow this as like one of his sketches. So what's happening here is this guy's going to take a spoon of his soup. It's going to pull on this, which is going to make this spoon, flip this onto the bird. That's going to make this thing fall into the bucket, which then is going to pull this chain, which is going to light this lighter, which is going to set off this firework, which is going to cut this rope here, which then is going to make this this napkin underneath this clock basically wipe this guy's mouth. So that's the idea behind it, that they're these kind of ludicrous sort of contraptions, and that's, like, I think a nice way to understand the 2D physics system in Unity as well. This is, I don't know, I doubt many of you played this, but this is a game I played when I was younger called The Incredible Machine. And basically it was kind of a similar concept of the Rube Goldberg style machine, where you had, in this case, you're trying to get the basketball, I think, through this gap here. And what happens is there's these little hamster wheels, and there's bowling balls, and when a bowling ball hits off a hamster wheel, the hamster starts turning. So what we're going to see here is these bowling balls are on conveyor belts. So this ball's going to hit off this hamster, he's going to start running, that's connected through a pulley to this, that sets that bowling ball going, and then the next one, and then also the basketball there at the top. So that's kind of how we've seen this implemented in games in the past. It generally is kind of like it kind of ways to have some sort of system or kind of interactions between different physics objects. And this game, like, gets progressively harder basically. But it's a nice simple example of how some of these concepts are also relevant if you want to, like, create or design your own games. So that is that. And then when we see this in the real world, it maybe looks a little bit different as well. If we were doing this in 3D, we'd maybe be creating things that look a little bit more like this. But you'll see here in this video, bearing is knocked over, goes down a slide, goes down a book, knocks over a couple of rolls of tape that knock down another bearing that goes through a funnel. That's it. But yeah, some of these basically get more complex and some of them are more simple. So you've probably seen these online, and the idea is basically that they're these kind of cool contraptions of all the sort of random weird stuff going on. And they're nice kind of machines to watch. They're a bit kind of mesmerizing to look at. And that's what I want you to think about as you're making your games this week. To think about, like, what's a kind of cool set of interactions we can have. Now, one thing I'm going to say is, before you actually go about, where in the past maybe we said that we would design the machines. I'm just going to turn off that volume in case it's coming through. But in the past we might have said that we'd create games, we'd do a design for a game, and then we kind of focus on making the mechanics. With a Rube Goldberg machine, what I'm going to suggest you do is instead kind of start creating some mechanics you think are interesting, and then look at ways you can piece those together as kind of puzzle pieces to make an interesting game. So Unity is finally open for me, and I'm just going to close that browser window. Great. So what we have here, this is our first week obviously working in Unity 2D, but I think you've all worked in 2D before, so I'm not really going to do any real detail on like what it means about working in 2D. I think you're all hopefully quite familiar with that. But we're going to set this up. First thing, we're going to expand out our sample scene, main camera, and we're going to change the background to something that doesn't look that awful default Unity blue. So I'm going to go for a kind of greenish type color. And what I'm going to do is create game object, 2D object, and I'm going to create a sprite, and it is going to be a circle. Perfect. That's basically, I'm not going to do too much to the sprite. When you're creating your own ones, I'd encourage you to well, it'll be on the brief on Brightspace, but to create your own assets for this, like sketch out a few things that might be balls, or like take pictures of balls that you see around the place, or like, you know, scrunch up some paper and take a picture of that and use that as your sprite, or just do some sketches, kind of whatever you want, but try and put your own spin on the visuals of this game as well. So what I'm going to add is a circle collider 2D. I can do that by hitting add component, and once I start typing circle, it's going to give me circle collider 2D. If we jump over here to Unity, I'm going to just enable and disable this, and hopefully as I do that you can see the green outline on this appears and disappears, and that's just representative of the circle collider. Okay, so that's basically all that means. All of this is fine. We don't need to change anything on this here, and we are going to add a rigid body 2D component. And now if we press play, the ball falls. Okay, which is basically what we want from the game. We want this to like represent our kind of realistic ball falling. And I'm also going to just hit auto mass, and that means it's just going to like calculate the mass that a ball this size should have. There's a few other things we can do. We might want to tweak the physics a little bit, and I'll get to that in a couple of minutes. First, what we're going to do is just get a basic course kind of set up, something that's going to represent our game. So to start off, maybe we start with the ball in the center of the screen, and I'm going to create another 2D sprite, and this time it's going to be a square. And I'm going to move this here, and because this is a sprite, I can drag it out like that, maybe something like that. I can also like zero this here if I want to be accurate with this, and I'm going to duplicate this, and I am going to rotate it so that there's a bit of a ramp. Actually, I'm going to change the positions of each of these. Because basically what I want is the ball to fall on the ramp to send the ball off. Now if I press play, we're going to see the ball fall through this ramp, and hopefully you know why that is. It's because it doesn't have any collider on it. So I'm going to select the two of these, and I'm going to add component, and I'm going to call this box collider 2D. Okay, and again, everything there is fine. It's going to default the correct sizes to this box collider, and now if we press play, we're going to have a ball that falls down there, goes to there. Cool. Great, we're starting to get somewhere. So the next thing I'm going to do is create some UI, some start and end conditions for this game, and that's just so that we have kind of a flow from start to finish. So what I'm going to do is go game object UI, and I'm going to select a button text mesh pro. I'm using text mesh pro because it will scale a little better, and I'm not going to import any examples. I don't need those. I'm going to select the canvas. One thing to do on the canvas is to make sure we select UI scale mode, to set that to scale with screen size, and that's going to mean as we scale up the screen, the button will scale up with it. A thing I think is very confusing in Unity is our UI is this weird 2D thing over here that I don't know. I don't think it makes any sense. Maybe it does. Maybe it makes perfect sense to you. I hope it does, but it makes zero sense to me. So I'm just going to put this maybe up here, and if I expand out the button game object, just going to say start game. Something like that. And I'm going to make the text size a little smaller so that it fits that button a bit better. Cool. That's my button. I'm gonna press play a good bit here. I tend to make games by doing a lot of like playing and testing and stuff, but what you'll see is basically the buttons here. We can click it, but it's not really doing anything other than changing its color. So we're gonna want to wire this up to the ball. So I'm gonna rename the circle to ball. And then I am going to, in Rigid Body 2D, I'm going to turn off Simulated. Okay, what this means is that this is no longer simulated. So now if we press play, the ball isn't going to fall. Okay, so it's taken out of the physics simulation for the time being. So the next thing I'm going to do is I want to connect up this button. If we go down here, this button component has an on click. And this is a Unity event. We'll be able to make custom ones of these, which I think are a really convenient way to do programming. But on click, it's going to drag the ball into here. So once we click the Start Game button, we are going to access the Rigid Body 2D, and we're going to change the simulated boolean to true. And what that's going to mean now is that as soon as we start the game, great, that's exactly what we want. One more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put an overlay behind this. So I'm going to select the canvas. I'm going to go Game Object 2D, UI and Image. And this, I'm just going to call this like Start Screen. And I am going to go to this mode and just drag this out to the boundaries of the screen. You'll see it snaps basically when you reach the UI bounds. Go. So that is that. I'm going to change the color of this to, I'm going to make it quite a dark color. We'll see what that looks like. And I'm going to change the alpha value here. Okay, and the alpha value just makes it transparent. So I'm going to do something like that so that we're kind of graying out the background a little bit. I'm going to basically move its place in the hierarchy to before the button so that the button appears on top of it, and I'm going to make the button a child of this. And the reason for that is, what we're also going to set up is when we hit the Start Game button, we're going to set this game object to inactive. So we're going to just get rid of all this menu. So go back to the button, and the cool thing is we can add other functions to on click. So we are going to drag the Start Screen game object in here, and we are going to go game object and set active, and we're going to set active to false. So now when we hit Start Game, we have the ball fall, and that's basically it. So there's a couple more things I'm going to do. I'm going to create for now I am just going to disable this, and I'm also going to set the ball to simulated again, because we're going to test out, we're basically going to test out, actually, you know what, I'm going to leave that not simulated. But what we're going to test out here at this stage is having the, actually, you know what, I'll leave it simulated, sorry about that. I'm going to create an empty game object. I'm not going to create it there. I'm going to select the square and press F on the keyboard when I'm inside in the game view. And this is where I'm going to create the empty game object. And I'm going to rename this to level goal. One thing I'm going to do is, because this is an empty game object, it's quite hard to see in the scene view where this is. And I can just hit this little icon here that is like a 3D cube. And if I select this yellow text label, it's going to say level goal there, so it just puts the name of the game object on this, and we can see it in the scene. So even though it's an invisible game object, we kind of know where it is. So that's my level goal. I'm going to add a box collider 2D, and I'm just going to put that there. And what I want basically is, as soon as this enters this, once the ball enters this level goal, we're going to reload the scene. Or well, we're going to end the game, actually, is the first thing we'll do. So I am going to set this to be a trigger so that it's not a collider. If it's a collider, the ball is going to hit off this and not move through it. And what we want is just as the ball moves through it to trigger this. So we've done that. The next thing we're going to do is, well, You know what, I'm going to make this, I'm going to duplicate this, and we're going to call this end screen. So we have a start and an end screen. I'm going to turn off the start screen again. Make sure the end screen is in. I'm going to move this button down for no particularly good reason. Well, maybe a slightly good reason, we'll see. And the text on this button, I'm going to change to replay. So that someone can click this and it's going to restart their game. And we are also going to add some text. So I'm going to select the end screen game object. I'm going to go game object, UI, and text Mesh Pro. Just going to make sure that's a child at the end screen. And we're just going to put some text here. Congratulations, you win. I'm just going to really roughly like change some of the stuff and maybe make it look a little bit nicer. For your games, I would definitely recommend making it look a lot nicer. What I'm doing here is not necessarily the prettiest way to do this. You know, I'm not really aligning things, and I'm just kind of throwing stuff together, but that's fine. Like, for something like this, we're just testing stuff out. So congrats, you win, and then we give the player the option to replay. So, kind of disable that game object again. I'm going to select the level goal, and I'm going to add a component, and this is a trigger event. I don't know why it's not letting me call it that. It might be a protected name. So I'm going to call this trigger Unity event. Sorry, I'm being silly here. I need to hit new script and hit create and add. Gonna double click this. It's going to open up JetBrains. And we'll give this a second to open up. And what we're going to do here is create a really simple script that's going to give us like that on-click style event. And we're going to just, I'm just going to delete all this stuff out even while this is opening. And I'm going to wait for this just to fully load up my my Unity and C# type stuff, so that it recognizes all my code. And we'll know that's happened because the color of stuff here should change in a second. Yeah, cool. So it's giving us some of these like little messages, and it's made some of these things bold. So what I want you to do is just keep an eye on this here. I'm not sure if, I think from what some of you said, Visual Studio doesn't necessarily do this. But basically, I'm going to create a public. I'm going to create a Unity event. And you'll see here it says Unity event in Unity engine.events. Okay, so that's one of these using statements. It's a module that's not necessarily included. So if you don't automatically get this text by your IDE, just make sure you put it in there. On trigger is all we're going to call that. And then what we're going to do is create another event here. So on trigger enter 2D is a built-in method to Unity that's going to check to see if the 2D collider on this game object, if anything, kind of enters that trigger area, that trigger volume. And all we do here is say on trigger dot invoke, and that's going to invoke the Unity event. Okay, so the Unity event is basically something that like we're going to wait until it's called, and it's going to be called as soon as something enters this trigger. So I'm going to jump back to Unity. It'll probably need to reload the compile the scripts and stuff like that. We should see like the on click. Yeah, we've got on trigger here. I'm going to hit plus there. This end screen. I'm going to do that. I'm going to say game object set active, and I'm going to set active to true. So now I am going to just make sure I'm actually going to turn off simulated, and we'll run through this with the start screen working. hit start, it's going to work. And our end screen pops up. Okay, we can hit the replay button at the minute. It's not gonna, it's actually, that's a good point. So if we jump in here to the end screen and we look at this button and what it's doing, it's got the, because I duplicated that button, it's doing the same functionality as before. So I'm going to create a empty game object here, and I'm going to call this my game manager. I don't care where in the world this is or what it's doing. It's not a game manager though. It's a game manager, and I'm going to add a component called level manager script. And this is just going to be a simple script that's going to manage the level. And if we had lots of levels, we'd use this to control what level to load next, or how our player's going to select levels and stuff like that. So, but we don't need to do that. This is going to again be pretty simple. Inside this, we're going to create a public. This has to be public for the Unity event to be able to access it. Reload level. We don't have to send anything to that. Sorry. This is a public void. There's no return to this. So public void reload level. And when this is called, it should reload our level. So what we want to do is go scene manager dot load scene. We want to get get this again. I just want to check see here. Yeah, good. Sorry, I have to call scene manager here first. Sorry. So the scene manager kind of controls all our scenes inside in Unity. So it's the thing that lets us say, you know, here's the first scene to play, here's the second, here's the third, but we have to tell it when to change scenes. So what we're going to do here is say to load a scene, and we're going to find out get active scene dot name. So we're going to basically, all this is doing is saying scene manager load, and it's going to go to the scene manager, so it's going to check itself, find out what the current scene's name is, and it's going to load the current scene basically. Okay, that's how we're just going to reload. Really simple script, but scene manager does a lot of work for us in terms of doing that as well. So now we can go to the end button, and all we're going to wire this up to is the game manager, and we're going to have the level manager script, and we're going to reload level. Okay, so now we can disable this, and we can check that all this is working. Have we got our start game working, end game, reload scene. Hit replay, start game. So it's a very short, uninteresting game, and it's going to stay uninteresting. What we're doing here isn't going to be, there's not much there's almost no player interaction other than deciding to start the game and maybe deciding to reload the game. One other thing that I'm going to do, and then I'm going to pause this video, or I'm going to take a break in this video and kind of split this up into a couple of different parts. But one thing I'm just going to show you is the camera. So if you remember with our character controller last week, we had our camera basically follow the player. We can do that here, but we're going to run into an issue. Okay, so we make our main camera a child of the ball game object, and even though that's a pretty cool effect, it's maybe not all that usable. So to fix that, we're going to use a Unity package. So we're going to go Window, Package Manager. We're going to change this from packages in project to in the Unity registry. And we're just going to have to wait for this to load it up. And we are going to want to, I'm just going to get a package called Cine Machine. And that's going to kind of control cameras for us. And this is going to allow us kind of manage the camera a bit easier. So in the past, we would have had to write like kind of follow scripts that like a camera follows the position of a game object. We're going to see this like gives us some nice smooth camera following, and we're going to be, as the game goes on, we're going to be able to track different objects. So we're going to move past this initial ball into like collisions with other game objects basically. So this is just loading in Cine Machine at the minute. So once we have Cine Machine in the game, we're following the camera. All we're going to do is change the build target to WebGL. We might build out the game at that stage, and then at least we can test it, see if it's working, and then I'll pause this video and put up another video for the second part to show kind of how we get some of the interesting interactions we might want. So I'm going to select the main camera now that Cine Machine is loaded in, and I'm going to type in Cine Machine Brain. Okay, and what that means is that this camera is now going to be controlled by the Cine Machine. And I'm going to, in the hierarchy, I'm going to go Game Object, Cine Machine, and I'm going to do a 2D camera, which is specifically for 2D games. And it's going to ask me what I want to follow. And in this case, all I need to do is follow the ball. And we'll see now, once we press play, we don't get that camera rotation. We also, you can probably see there, the camera will kind of allow the ball to move to the bounds of the scene, but not necessarily off of them. So it's got a really nice sort of like, a really nice way of managing how the camera is going to work. So that is the last thing I said we do is build settings. And that's opened up on my second monitor. I'm going to go WebGL, hit switch platform. Great. So that's the switch platform. So basically all I need to do now is I'm actually going to save the scene. And I can build and run. I'm going to stop the video at this point because there's no point this loading bar, as you know, to build WebGL games takes a couple of minutes. I don't envisage there being any issue with this. But we'll see, unless that's built. No, it hasn't built it yet. But if there is any issues, I'll make sure to address them in the next video. But hopefully at this stage, like pretty much everything we need is basically working there. We've got our game starts, we've got some physics, we've got some interactions, we've got a camera following it, we can replay, we've got a flow. Like we've got, this isn't, as I said, a very interactive game. It's not really a game at all, but it's the beginnings of something that could become a game. And we're hopefully getting a little bit more familiar with 2D physics in Unity. So I'm going to pause the video there. And I'll be back for the second part after this.